the Dilly with Willy.
Welcome to another episode of the Dilly with Willy. And we have several collections here in the museum. We have our automobiles, we have our historic photos, and we have clothing collection. And at this time, I'd like to introduce Miss Connie, and she's one of our clothing experts. So take it away, Connie.
Thank you very much, Willie. One of the things that I thought would be really interesting to start with was a dress. It's actually a two-piece outfit that's probably one of the older things we have on the floor. It looks pretty uninteresting in a way, but it's a dress that has a lot going for it. You can see that the woman who wore this had to have been fairly corseted. This is a very thin waist. The shoulders are boned. And the skirt is considered short because it just tipped the ankle. This was all important to do what this outfit was designed to do, and that was to ride a bike. And the color, that gray wool color, was also well thought out to ride a bike because it was a dirty job. Riding a bike, you got dirty. So that didn't show it. So I think the thing that, when I look at this, I think I just get on my bike, I wear my shorts, I put on spandex, I do whatever. These poor women, in order to ride the bike, had to wear their corset. They often wore skirts. Sometimes they wore bloomers, which were kind of pants that usually came down a little below the knee, but sometimes even to the calf. Baggy affairs that nobody really liked. Even the bike riders weren't crazy about them, but they did wear them. They tried divided skirts. But in all honesty, a lot of men felt very threatened by women wearing divided skirts because they were a little bit too much like pants. So a lot of women opted to continue to wear the skirt. The fascinating thing about this skirt, and this just shows you what the morality of the time was, the underside of the hem is lined with leather, 2-inch band of leather all the way around. And I thought that leather was to protect the rider's skirt from getting damaged by grease no, it was designed to keep that skirt down so that ankle didn't show. Sometimes they even put in lead weights. So that's what it took for a lady to ride a bike like this. This is called, and Willie's probably going to help me out on this, and he may even step in and correct me because this is not exactly my area, but the ordinary bike was the popular bike of the time that preceded this wonderful bike right here. And clearly, this was not a bike for everybody. I don't even think most men were probably very happy riding this thing. So that when this bike, which was called a safety bike, was developed, women could even ride a bike like this for several reasons. One, it has a skirt guard back here to try to keep the skirt from catching in the wheels, in the spokes. It also has a wooden back bumper. Fender. Yeah, I'm thinking car. Sometimes, these bikes, by the way, were very heavy. So not only is she wearing a cumbersome outfit to do this, but she's riding a bike that could have weighed 50 pounds, right?
Right.
So sometimes a reckless woman who really wanted to ride fast and more easily would remove the fender and even the spoke guard, to which people thought she was absolutely insane to do such a thing because it was reckless endangerment. So the other thing, let me just say one other thing. You might note this seat. This is specially designed for a woman. And I have to say that it's got some padding in reasonable places, and it would probably be pretty comfortable, and I wouldn't hesitate to wear it. There were two other innovations that happened that helped make bikes like this possible. One was the invention of vulcanized rubber in around 1860 by Goodyear. And then in the late 80s, Dunlap came along and created what I thought were pneumatic tires, but Willie has said they're semi-pneumatic, right?
Semi-pneumatic tires. They're solid rubber with a small air tube in them, so you can put air in to soften the ride. But it's kind of interesting when you talked about the high wheel bicycle The bad thing about that is if Pops took it to the tavern coming home, he might fall off of it. That's why they came out with safety bikes.
Well, you can see this is a very important device.
And it also has another feature for the ladies. It has a chainless shaft drive system on it. So it doesn't have a chain to catch the skirt or whatever. So it's a fabulous little bicycle.
It really is. And you can see the difference. I think they call this a drop frame low mount bike.
Right.
And if you look at that and that, you sort of understand why. Now, what makes this this is another important thing. They actually did design some specialty shoes, but for the woman who really didn't want to buy special bike shoes, they could wear their regular shoes and gaiters. So they had this type of look that made it a lot easier to pedal and ride. So this was part of the gear. And also, they often wore hats. This is a boater. Sometimes there were bowlers. And so there was a sort of look. Fashion was always a consideration. But what was really important about this little combination right here is what it did from a social level. And what happened is when women were able to have the liberation of being out on their own, something they could not do except maybe if they were riding a horse, but then we've got a very wealthy group of people. They could actually get on the bike. They could ride for miles. They were on their own. These things were really important in a society where not only was the clothing constraining, but so was the society. In order to ride a bike, women had to put up with doctors saying, the early medical people felt that, in fact, it was dangerous for people to ride bikes. It was bad for your heart. You got all sorts of diseases, which had absolutely nothing to do with riding a bike. I'm not saying that you couldn't go head over it and do some damage. But and once they began to realize that that wasn't even a factor, the bike became popular and with middle-class people as well as wealthy people. So there was an economic leveling that happened as well as an independence. And one of the things about this bike that I like is that this bike was made by a company called Pope. And Pope originally got involved with making the ordinaries. And he actually wasn't in favor of this safety bike. But in Europe, this was the popular bike, especially in England. And so when this bike started being imported, Pope got on the bandwagon and started manufacturing them. And Pope is responsible for some lovely cars that we have that Willy can tell you about because he then went into car manufacturing. So this is why I think this whole linkage, this is why I wanted to start here, because I think there's a fascinating story. And just to give you a little sense of the morality of the times, in 1893, there was a woman who decided that she was going to ride one of these bikes. And she put on a pair of blue bloomers that ended at her knee and a pair of very tight leggings or tights. They aren't exactly sure what. And she caused an absolutely huge scandal because this was such a brazen act.
And that's the Dilly with Willy. Visit the Fountainhead Antique Auto Museum featuring historic cars and fashion. Quite simply, second to none.